Beep, 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 beep. Okay, so you guys are coming back from, I forgot the name, Politan Station, and you basically have papers that'll get you back through the Malibor Gate. If you recall, going through the last time, you were boarded and inspected by Imperial troops, or really it's Malibor troops, but they were kind of overrun by the Imperial troops instead, as they've started to gain a bit of a foothold and starting to take more of an active approach in the system. You'll notice on the, I guess, shuttle flight back that it's a lot more crowded than it was on the way into the system. There are quite a few more people jammed into this shuttle leaving the system, leaving the inner portion of the system, than there are going in. Especially after the events of last week or the last couple of days. There's a lot of people trying to get out of the system, especially off the docks, or off the Politan docks, because of they're not really sure what's going to happen, if it's just going to be like a kind of a localized semi-riot or more. But it's a fairly quiet and somber affair as everybody leaves. If you look around, you might notice one or two other people who are carrying scars or wounds from the festivities there on the docks, but no one's really communicating very much. And when you pass through the gate, the security isn't nearly as tight leaving the system as it is going into the system. They don't really so much board the thing as just kind of do a quick glance in. Like the station opens and it's actually just regular Malibor security folk. It's not Imperial security. And there's no real rhyme or reason to it. It's just a kind of a noticeable thing that leaving the system, it's not as secure as going into the system. And you'll make your way back fairly uneventfully back to the I guess the confines of your home at this point, back to the station and back to the bar, I guess. Did we ever decide if you guys were going to keep it, or what name you guys were going to give it? I don't know if I ever.
Well, I think it's completely under Clayton's control now, and so I think it's basically like Keela's. Yeah, I think that's kind of how we ended.
Right. I don't know if we ever
bed
made
and booze, I think.
Yeah, bed and booze. Not so many beds anymore. Just Keela's booze. But okay, so you guys make it. By the time you make it back to the station, the news and everything is really picked up. The riot is what it's being called now. It was originally labeled as a protest. It very quickly got changed to a riot after the events. Now you don't specifically recall there being a lot of looting and rioting and that sort of thing. It felt more like it was just a protest that got a little out of hand, and then if you remember, one or two or more people threw some explosive devices, and that kind of turned the whole thing into what you might see back in the 60s, the 60s of this planet, with the security forces of the Imperium, you want to call them the Imperium, the Empire, pushing out and doing a lot of kind of damage to the just local civilians, with most of them not really being involved in it other than to just be kind of caught in the crossfire. But when you get back, you're, of course, the news that you see as you move through the station, that you can watch on some of the displays and things as you go through, is showing it in a completely different light. It's not so much just a peaceful protest that had something kind of go wrong. It looks like, at least the kind of the angles that they're showing, the way it looks very much like it was a full out sort of coordinated attack on this Imperial installation. And let's see if I read this here.
Now, if I'm not mistaken, too, that was the same installation that we were in, wrecking havoc with, right?
Yes. Yep.
Okay. And at the end of that, didn't Biff pretend or set off like a false alarm to make it look like a meltdown or something like that?
Yes.
Okay.
And so what I have here is riot and protest outside the Imperial facility is making major headlines and has driven the Empire to increase its military footing at the station itself at Politan. So that's what you're seeing on the news, is that the news is kind of swinging this from the point of view of, these are a bunch of insurgents attacking, a peaceful Imperial installation, kind of unprovoked, starting these riots. It's reporting a large group of individuals stormed into the facility, slaughtering the kind of inhabitants, for lack of a better word, the technicians and crew of the facility, and then initiating a generator meltdown. The meltdown was narrowly prevented by kind of some quick thinking by the people on the station, and that no doubt saved the facility and possibly a pretty huge portion of the Politan Station itself. So the news is really pushing this to that some insurgents, probably Hands of Valiant people, got inside the station with the intent of blowing up this Imperial facility, and not so much doing the exact same thing that was done at the station on Malibor 3, but a similar effect, having a gigantic explosion, et cetera, et cetera. In response to this, the Imperials have increased their military footing and have all but taken over control of Politan Station, setting up security checkpoints across the entire station, and pretty much overseeing anything that comes and goes from that station. So all the movement of goods and personnel is being very, very heavily regulated now onto and off the station. They've also begun, that you're starting to hear a little bit of this. I mean, pretty quick, this news is going around, even though it's only been, I don't know how long it would take to go in and out of system on the shuttle, say half a day. You've heard that they've started commandeering hangars and doing raids on kind of respectable warehouses and docks, supposedly looking for contraband and that sort of thing. So that's kind of the first thing you're noticing, is that this riot/attack, and in a way your involvement in this is being pushed as a larger scale event, giving the Imperials an opportunity to kind of dig themselves in deeper into the system. Let's see, blah, 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 blah. There's a lot of grief. You're going to start hearing this amongst people, a lot of grief amongst the owners of the goods. But the Storage Guild is allowing the Imperials to have full sway, and then Storage Guild all but controls a large chunk of Politan Station, because it's a big kind of shipping and receiving and that sort of point. So other than the transport people who control the actual flow of the goods, the station itself tends to be mostly controlled by the Storage Guild. And I think I had that right. And the Storage Guild is run by Fiend, who is the de facto head of the whole place right now, if you guys recall. I'm trying to find his name on my lists. Where are you at, Fiend? So if you recall, Fiend Dalen was the one who is kind of the de facto head of the Great Houses right now. He was also the head of the Storage Guild. So, or I'm sorry, wait a minute, was he
originally
Guild?
Head of the Storage Guild? Or?
I can't remember. Hold on, I'm trying to dig it up. He was the Loader Guild, but I think he controls the Storage Guild now. Yeah. So he's a Loader Guild, but he controls the Storage Guild now because the Storage Guild leader was killed in the attack on the Great Houses. So he basically is the head of the Storage Guild and the Transportation Guild, and obviously the Loader Guild, which he was already the head of. So he has basically given, at least what it feels like, pretty much full control of the station, which was all under his sway at that point anyway, over to the Imperials, is what it's starting to feel like. The riot and the heavy-handed response for the Imperials is actually starting to spark a number of additional protests, and this is like all over the place now. So you're starting to see these protests. These are mostly peaceful protests taking place, not so much on the docks or on the station, because they really can't. The Imperials have put too much of a kind of a cordon around that, but also but on other planets. So on the other planets and other systems, not other systems, other cities and things, you're starting to see additional protests are being talked about, and they're going to start see this because there's a lot of people unhappy right now amongst the working classes, amongst your class of people. Say, there's starting to be a lot of upset folks about what's going on.
So the folks like coming into the bar and stuff, we'd be hearing them gripe and moan and so forth.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
And
okay.
I'm scooting ahead in time some here. So I'm not going to basically over the next week or so. Yep.
I was going to say before we scoot ahead too far in time, can we kind of have like a I almost said family discussion. Can we have like a group discussion? Just...
Yeah, like I said, let me get some of this out of the way, and then I'll let you have it because there's some other stuff I need just to make sure you understand.
Yeah, sure.
Let's see. There's widespread, like I said, over the course of the next week, so you guys can have this discussion at some point in that as you watch these events unfold. Additional protests will spring up around the system, and it's starting to have a noticeable effect on production rates in the system. And you hear this from some of the people coming and going in the bar, that the fuel output level, and if you recall, this system is all about fuel output from the major, basically, world planet level fuel refinery that's in system. It says that I just made a number up. Fuel output has dropped by 7 or 8%, which hasn't happened in decades. So the actual fuel output from the thing is being affected by these protests and by kind of grumbling amongst working classes. And that's a huge deal, like, because that's money in everybody's pockets now. So that's kind of what's been going on. I got some other stuff to do, but I'll let you guys kind of discuss and hash out what you feel about these things before I move on.
Sure. I think that just from my perspective, at least the way that we kind of left off our last mission, and in particular the deed that was done, the dirty deed that was done, I think is weighing heavily on Slaishk's conscience. And I think that once we get back to the bar, I think he wants to address Kurt, if that's all right.
That's your group.
Yeah,
I'm up for it. Kurt's ready.
All right, sweet. I just think from a narrative perspective, it might be cool to instead of brushing it under the rug. All right, let's see. How about?
Oh, we're gonna do that now. Okay.
Kurt, what the hell was that back there?
What are you talking about? What?
Just jumping on board and massacring all those helpless workers in that headquarters.
Well, they may have been helpless and defenseless, but they're a part of the machine. And quite frankly, I'm not willing to take the risk anymore of being identified and having that come back to get me. So as much as it pains me, it's just something that had to be done.
Kurt, as we all just recently found out, weren't you two also just a part of the machine?
I was a part of that machine, and that gave me quite a perspective on what that machine is all about. And although I have a very narrow focus towards one element of that machine, I can assure you that I know that machine is no good and it needs to go. And unfortunately, that means in some cases, the small and perhaps meaningless parts of the machine are going to have to suffer too.
Well, I don't know about you guys, but I did not sign up for this kind of involvement, just murdering helpless victims. And your thoughts about them all being kind of a part of the machine is all fine and dandy, but I don't think I can hate an organization enough to kill even those that might end up being Kurt's one day, helping the Alliance and helping us. I mean, heck, Kurt, you and I, we've grown very, very close. I would say you're honestly, you're my only human friend, and a very good one. But all those people in there that they might have one day come down to to our good friend Oscalet over here and heard his words, and Oscalet could have gotten through to them, and they might have been able to be turned to.
Slaishk, are you still
our
upset
perspective.
that we killed all those Imperials? Come on.
Yes, Oscalet.
It's been like how many? It's been like 2 days now. I'm over it. I mean, wasn't my favorite thing to do, but every time the rebels attack an Imperial ship, they kill hundreds of Imperials that may not have individually committed a crime. Does that mean that we shouldn't, that the rebellion shouldn't attack those ships?
In that scenario, aren't those people on the ships engaged in some kind of a military action? I mean, we were
Not
on the base.
necessarily.
From my perspective, they were just guys.
What about the
behind
ship's
the
barber?
desk.
What about the ship's barber? Is he part of the military machine?
I don't know what a barber is. What is that?
Oh, you see this stuff on my face? My body is is completely covered in this stuff called hair. You see? Here, see, touch this. Touch this. That's hair.
I can't.
Okay, it grows. It becomes
So
more.
and
More of it
soft.
comes out, and sometimes, people like to remove parts of it, and humans do this very often.
Yeah. Ridiculously far too often.
Yeah. Anyway,
Well,
there's a person on that ship.
Keep it
There's a
as it
person
may.
on that Star Destroyer who cuts the hair of the humans. And, he's not killing people. Did he deserve to die?
Did he deserve to die? Of course not. I would say that sounds like a ridiculous accusation.
All right,
The point is,
would you say that the rebels
if you-
shouldn't
if
destroy
you-
that ship?
I would say if the ship itself is committing an atrocity, then the rebels can attack the ship. But if the rebels were on board that ship and the ship had surrendered, should they do the shovey shove to everyone on board, or can they ferry them to a prison facility? Can they bring them to a recruitment center? There seems to be a lot of ways.
Okay.
to deal with this more
Let's talk
peacefully.
about what our options were instead of talking about the hypothetical. Well, what do you think we should have done?
Our options were limited.
Our options were two options, pretty much. Either we kill everyone or we don't. What happens if we don't kill those people?
Clayson would get angry at us.
No, we would probably be dead. How far out of system do you think we would have gotten? How far off that shipyard? How far off that station?
Perhaps
We're not exactly an inconspicuous bunch here. You stick out like a sore thumb at 200 meters. If you want to be more,
This is true.
if we want to keep everyone alive, we're gonna have to start disguising you as a Wookiee or something.
You can use some of my hair.
Yes. Well, I certainly don't feel good about this. Knowing that Kurt was once an Imperial means that we potentially killed a dozen Kurts there, and knowing how fond I've grown of him, it seems like a very unethical thing that we did. I don't know. I don't know if we should be following Clayson's murderous missions. So
Oh,
close.
wait. Oh, I suppose let me make myself kind of clear, Slaishk, because obviously this is a great concern to you, and I respect you, and I don't want to be putting you off, but it's not my intent to run around and indiscriminately kill Imperials. That's not what I'm about. But I will recognize that there's going to be instances that I'm going to try and avoid that may press upon, due to the circumstances, very drastic measures having to be taken. And I don't like them. But in light of what we went through on being captured, it's changed my perspective, and I'm a little bit more willing to walk down that path, but I want to avoid it. I look at what just happened at the Politan Station. I look at that as a bit of a failure on my part. Had we perhaps been able to be a bit more stealthy, a tactic slightly different, we may have been able to avoid the entire situation of being in the room with those technicians and the officers at that time. And all of that could have been avoided. So I don't revel in what happened, and I certainly don't feel good about what happened. But at some level, I'm coming to terms with it and trying to take that instance, learn from it, and hopefully avoid it in the future.
Well, very well. I don't like it, but I'm glad to see you're not as cold-blooded as me, I guess.
What? You're not making any sense. I'm gonna go have a drink.
Good. Go drink. Go drink. All right. Well, very good. Let's try to avoid unnecessary killing in the future, if possible.
Did someone say drink?
The whole unnecessary killing thing is funny. Let's try and avoid unnecessary killing, people.
Yes.
says the guy whose first instinct is to just chop it on everything as he goes through.
Chop, exactly. But you have to understand from his perspective, it's all about chopping the guys with the guns. Someone who's after us, killing us, it's open game, it's free game. I think that was the only thing he wanted to get off his chest, and for me, that's a satisfying dialogue.
That's good though. That's good. You see your character.
Yeah, it was good.
He's an honorable, killing machine.
Trying to go with my my character sheet, my motivations and duty. Trying to make it all balance out. All right. So so that's good. So that was like immediate aftermath of coming back. Now in the weeks following, should we have another conversation, or do you have more stuff to go through?
I got a little bit more, and I think you guys can.
Okay.
Have some fun with it. So, are you guys understanding what I'm doing with the media here? That the media has. How they're kind of pushing this. It's very heavily slanted. Is kind of the easiest way to put that. And there's also, as you guys start to notice, it looks a lot. It doesn't look exactly like what you recall. It looks. More damage was done than what you recall having seen or done. So you're not really sure if more happened while you guys were inside, or if more happened after you kind of made your hasty retreat, or what exactly it was. But it definitely isn't exactly what you recall, and it looks a little bit more kind of devastating than what you remember. Okay, so a few days after. This is my political speech I was trying to work on, so we'll see how well this flows. So I was dozing in and out while I was doing it. Excuse me. A few days after this whole thing happens, the whole riot, and the Imperials kind of taking their heavier stance and so forth, as I described. There will actually be an address by the Queen of the Viridian system, if you guys recall her. I think it's been a long time since she existed.
What was it? What, the Queen of
the Viridian system? That's that one. She was the one at the Great House meeting.
Okay, all right.
Was that Peridot?
Oh, is it Peridot system? Is that what
I thought it was Peridot.
Yeah,
I can't remember.
Yeah,
Viridian.
that rings
something.
more of a bell.
It's been a while, guys. I'm sorry.
I thought you said Rodian, as in like Greedo.
Rodian.
I was like, what? Where?
Greedo system. Or whatever they sound. Trying to find it here. Yeah, my stuff's so scattered now. I'm trying to find all this stuff. Blah, 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 blah.
But the intent is it's the Queen that was at the Great House meeting.
Right. Yeah. I'm just trying to find it here.
I gotcha.
I was writing this stuff at work, and I don't have any of my notes at work. So I was writing down like, okay, was it the Viridian system that she was in? But no, I don't recall anything. Maybe it was Peridot. Sounds right. Okay, well, either way, the Queen comes and has a few things to say. She has it's not impromptu, but she does have a quick kind of press conference, if that makes sense, where she's pulled aside and asked of what she thinks about this, what's going on in general. And here's her speech, quote unquote. I will not mince words, nor will I condescend my neighbors by sugarcoating the truth. Over the past 2 weeks, I have watched the peace and tranquility of our small slice of the galaxy replaced by fear and suspicion. Regardless of what some might say, ever since the attack on the Great Houses, the Malibor system, and by extension the whole of the 7 systems, has been at war. No matter their intent, the Empire's arrival brought that war to our doorstep. How long before that war spills over into our daily lives? Insidiously, through small allowances that escalated over time, the Malibor people have signed away rights and privileges that their forebears fought and died for, undercutting the very foundations of their independence in this process. The Malibor people deserve to decide their own fate, and I fear that the catastrophic loss of so much of their great house leadership has stripped them of their voice. How long before that their ability to choose is stripped away as well? Though I abhor the violent actions of the so-called Hands of Valian, I can understand their motivations. It is often essential to resist tyranny before it exists. Most subjugations have been made possible because men moved too late to prevent them. I urge the Malibor people to think long and hard before handing their sovereignty over to those whose interests are counter to their own. Freedom, once lost, is lost forever. And then you see her kind of leave.
Holy moly.
And at
This
some
was
point,
a press conference, right?
yeah, vaguely a press conference. She'll get asked, and it definitely sounds like something she's prepared. Although it's not like she doesn't call a giant press conference for it, but she has asked at some point by a media person.
Okay.
And but it certainly sounds like something she has at least somewhat prepared, or I prepared for her. And not long after this, a media person, because this is pretty big news, having her say something to this effect across the whole.
Yeah, that was like she almost gave credence to the Hands of Valiant.
Yeah.
That's huge.
Yeah. And so, of course, this will prompt a response from the Malibor system and Fiend in specific. He'll be asked by another random media personality as he's making his way into like a house meeting, just a general kind of, I guess, meeting of his house or some other notable dignitaries. And he will condemn the whole like protests and riots. Like basically anybody who's worth anything is all saying these riots need to stop, the protests need to stop, et cetera, et cetera. He immediately points to the involvement of the Hands of Valiant. That's the first thing he says. I don't have anything written for him. Well, not specifically written for it. And he asked for increased vigilance from people, as he mentioned in a previous kind of press release, and support for law and order. Malibor Systems, a pivotal resource for the galaxy, and the Empire has become ever more reliant upon the system for raw materials and fuel. They are understandably concerned by recent events, and I see no problem with their efforts to protect those interests. Ever since the attack, this is one thing you've noticed, ever since the attack, Fiend's personal security has been replaced by Imperial troopers. So he no longer has kind of just what look like regular security guild folk. He actually has Imperial troopers that tend to follow him around as bodyguards now, not the local guild. So
that was who? I'm sorry, I missed the name.
Fiend Dalen. He's the guy who was the leader of the Loader Guild, and the one
now he's got Imperial troops.
Yeah, and the de facto head of the Great Houses. He's also the one who, if you recall way back, kind of gave his okay to work hand in hand with the Empire. That was a ways back. So he doesn't outright condemn anything that the Queen has said, but he just kind of reiterates the desire to to leave things as they are, to let the Empire continue to protect its interests, to just stay vigilant and respect the rule of law and authority, et cetera, et cetera. And like I said, I just made mention that it's something you've noticed, and I'm sure other people have noticed as well, that his regular security guild kind of escort has been replaced by Imperial security. So, but that's the other major event. Of course, that gets a lot of talk between the Queen's like small speech and everything else. So, a lot of talk on that on the news. What's it mean? Parsing all of her words, all that good stuff. I'll let you guys have some thought on that.
All right. Yeah.
Wow, what do you guys think of all that? The Queen seems to be a little bit more of a freedom fighter than I initially thought.
Yeah, and wasn't she, I suppose, in the opinions of several of the Malibors, kind of like the true ruler from like a historical perspective?
Yeah, I do remember that.
So it looks kind of like Fiend is certainly in the back pocket of the Imperials with the security detail, or rather, I should say, maybe the Imperial is taking a good interest in him. They've got a good working relationship.
Yes.
Yeah, I agree.
Thena is certainly in bed with the Imperials, I think. I don't normally like hereditary leadership, shall we say?
Sure.
Not really my thing. Deciding who rules a star system by who their mom was or dad.
Yeah.
Not really my cup of tea. Although sometimes it's just a roll of the dice, right? Whether it's a respectable person or monster. This queen seems all right.
Yeah, and also interestingly enough, I never really knew where she stood, or I really didn't even have a strong opinion on who she was or anything based on that the first moment that we met, in fact, at the Great House meeting where everything went to heck. She and her Chiss bodyguard seemed so composed and without fear
You and that
during
Chiss
all
bodyguard,
of the
god
fiasco.
damn it.
Hey, listen, I'm just bringing up facts.
Force
They
damn
were
it.
very composed, and they had they had no fear. And at the end of it all, it seemed that, at least in my eyes, it almost seemed like they might have known that an attack was coming or something. Which actually, now that we think about it, she almost publicly endorsed the Hands of Valiant, and perhaps she knew that the Hands of Valiant would be there to cause destruction. Although if that was the case, it certainly backfired because the power all went to Fiend, and the Imperials kind of marched in, unless that's what she wanted all along. I don't know.
The so-called Hands of Valiant at that meeting did not target the Imperials. Did not target Imperial
No.
personnel specifically. In fact, the Imperials were conspicuously not targeted.
So I wonder then why she was so calm during that meeting, unless really the only reason she was calm was because she had a perfect defense, so she wasn't scared.
Don't forget that the Chiss young lady actually took out the guy that was standing next to you, Slay, because he kind of made a move, as you described it, towards the Queen's pit that she was in, whatever that was, that she was sitting in. So I could surmise a scenario where the Hands of Valiant were somewhat in league with the Imperials at that particular meeting, and that the Queen may or may not have known anything was going down, but I could certainly see how maybe the Queen could be sympathetic to the Hands of Valiant, but not necessarily be in league with them. Because if she was in fact in league with them, why would the gentleman who is standing next to Slay make a move against her, or at least appear to make a move against her?
To me, the Hands of Valiant seem like a either completely corrupted or misled organization who are essentially operating, whether they know it or not, as Imperial patsies, creating trouble in the Malibor system that the Imperials can capitalize on when they're not capitalizing the trouble that we create personally, you and I, to increase the Imperial presence in the system.
Yeah.
While destroying,
makes a lot of
and they
sense.
destroy the existing power structures so the Imperials can step in.
Yep. It's going to
In
fracture
fact,
what
that kind of
leadership
goes
they
along, right? And it kind of goes along with what you were saying. The Hands of Valiant may or may not be a good force for the system of Malibor and everyone in it, but the Imperials can capitalize on that by, for instance, setting up agents at the Great Hall meeting to kill everyone to allow them to sweep the power for themselves, and they really have nothing to do with the Hands, but they're just people pretending to be them, undercover.
That's true.
There's so many ways the Imperials could play this. Just look at how well they're playing the media. I mean, the propaganda is fantastic.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I mean, if you want to be confident in the middle of the battle, it's best to know who's on your side, right? How better to know who's on your side than to actually have them be on your side. Put your people in place to look like somebody else. Yeah.
So, what do we think about the Queen? I mean, is this a person of interest, a potential ally, or do we have to be extra cautious now?
I'm kind of curious to see what Clayson thinks of the whole situation, and maybe how's the rebellion thinking about the Hands of Valiant, and what does the rebellion think of the Queen? What does he know?
Yes.
I don't know if he'd be willing to tell us much, but it can't hurt to ask, right?
No, we could certainly.
That's true.
It's worth finding out how the rebellion considers the Queen and the Hands of Valiant.
Y'all need to talk to Clayson.
Yeah.
What's his number again? I get my comm link here. I thought I had it
Let
written
me buy
down.
you a drink. You send him a text. How would you like a drink at the pub? Yeah, he can definitely be made available. If you guys need to have a chat with him, he can definitely hop in for a drink at some point.
We need to. I suppose we need some kind of a debrief off of our mission anyway, right? I mean.
Yeah. So he can stop by for that. That might be the easiest way to do it, is to have him stop by for you guys for a quick debrief of the mission.
Why not?
Yeah. What the hell? He didn't tell you to start a war. I should have had him be like the one from all the old kind of 80s and 90s action movies. This isn't your personal war. Blah blah blah. Go with your gun and badge. The screaming and yelling.
Writing checks your body can't cash.
Right, yeah, lieutenant or whatever it is. I always think of the one from Last Action Hero, yelling and cursing at the guys. The commissioner's riding my ass. I can't believe what you're doing. Blah blah blah. It's not your war zone. That sort of thing. But yeah, he won't be particularly happy about the whole thing, but I guess we can do that in character. So he'll stop by at least a couple days after the riot, just to because when you guys get back, you can hand the information over to the techs that are down in the bottom of the vault.
Okay.
Yeah, you don't need to
Basement.
hand him personally. Because remember, you're basically staying at a rebel base now.
Yeah.
Yeah, you don't need to personally find him to hand the stuff over. They would know full well about what you guys were doing. So he'll stop by at some point, say within a couple of days after it, just to That way it's not exactly connected to you guys showing back up in the day of the riot and all that other stuff. Because no doubt he would be busy as a security guy.
Now, J-Bot, in the meantime, as this time is passing, I actually want to start going to a shooting range, if there's one on the station.
Okay. I don't know if there'd be an official shooting range. Is that something that would exist in the Star Wars universe?
I mean, like, people must practice shooting somewhere.
Yeah,
right?
I'm betting you could probably find some time at the local range. There would have to be something there, even if it's just a local.
It's probably just like low power, blasts.
Right, but it would be what I'm thinking is akin to like a guy who sells arms, like a more reputable just seller purveyor of weapons would have kind of a couple of lanes for you to test drive equipment. If that makes sense. So you could definitely find a place like there. I don't think there would be like a shooting club. I'm thinking of how we tend to do these things down in the South, is we just have places. Hey, you can go here and pay $5 and spend an hour shooting at paper. I don't know that would exist on the base.
Yeah. What I'm trying to do is I'm trying to pick up a new specialization in sharpshooting.
Yeah, but I think we could find a place. I don't have a good name for you right off the bat, but yeah, I think it would be closer to, if you guys are familiar with like Bass Pro Shops and things, where they have like an archery lane. If you want to test out like a new bow, you can go and they'll have like a 1-lane archery lane. Be akin to that. Like, hey, yeah, I've got this shop sells rifles and equipment, and they have a lane where you can pay nominally to spend some time at, but it's not like an official range.
Sure.
It won't be like hundreds of other people there. I think the security places would have one, like a security police station, for lack of a better term, would have one, but you're as an individual, you wouldn't be able to really go there and use the police range or the security guild range. I know around here, a lot of them actually use the private ranges, believe it or not. They do have one large one that's like right through the woods behind my house that I hear them blasting away at all the time, which is always fun. But yeah, you'd be able to find a place. Okay. How long does it take you to learn that? Does it say?
No.
I think that make it like thematic.
Right. Yeah.
I'm just trying to say, I
wasn't sure. I shot a guy in that last fight, and I suddenly feel like I could really be really good at it.
Yeah, I think that after the last fight, I've been getting shot a bunch recently, and I just want to be better at shooting people fast, so that I get shot less.
I got you. Well, you're used to using the. Is the sharpshooter something that's for longer distances, or is it for any distance?
It's for both. It's for short and long.
Oh, okay. Yeah. You should be able to do that then. I don't see any real reason why you can't spend a few weeks of hardened, focused practice doing however it is you become a sharpshooter, learning to use your sights. Learning what are these things? It's something that nobody uses in the Star Wars.
Right. Everyone fires from the hip.
Yeah, except for the auto-targeting guy that everybody made fun of.
Oh my gosh, yeah. That's why he's so good. And it all makes sense. He actually aimed. He aimed, guys.
Right. It's like, oh, he's got an aimbot. Well, yeah, he does, but he also uses it, because I'm fairly certain everybody could have one of those if they really wanted it. It's the future, crying out loud.
All right.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
picking up that specialization.
All right. Yep. So Clayson will stop by, and he will, of course, have a beer. He will be grumbly about the whole situation. The same. It won't be as. I wasn't expecting you guys to start a war, but it also feels like what he was thinking was kind of a nice move, like a nice chess move, ended up backfiring in a way. So he's like, oh, we'll get some information and everything will be hunky dory, but ended up kind of backfiring, and the Imperials are using it as an opportunity to kind of solidify their power, which is not what he wanted. But he will say that the information you guys got was good. It is good information. It hasn't been fully vetted yet, like it hasn't been torn apart and run through all the processors and stuff, but they think it's going to be useful for seeing where the supply lines are for the Imperials. So instead of attacking directly at them, they can start attacking those supply lines and dealing with those. So he thinks that's going to be pretty beneficial. Obviously, he's disappointed with how things transpired, and he definitely wants to know more about what happened. Like, how did you guys end up starting a meltdown? Like, because he can only assume all that stuff was you guys. Like, he can only assume that you guys started the meltdown. What were you thinking? Like, you know, I didn't want to destroy the entire station. What is it with you guys and explosions, et cetera, et cetera?
Well, you know that we're not exactly a subtle bunch often. Sometimes we do cause a little more damage than we originally intend to. But I will say that we weren't trying to blow up the whole station. And we didn't actually start a meltdown at that facility. We set off a alarm that indicated that the reactor was melting down. Actually, I don't really know what Kurt did. Kurt did it. Kurt, what did you do again?
Yeah, so
and the buck is passed.
Yeah, the buck is passed. I figured out, I hacked into the system. I figured out a couple of the fail safes and bypassed them. That tricked the alarm systems into thinking that there was an imminent meltdown. And so the alarms went off, which per Imperial procedure meant everybody had to evacuate the facility. So certainly the Imperials are going to be able to, you know, look at the records and determine that, lo and behold, there was no physical meltdown. So, you know, can't really cover your tracks when you're moving quick, but I could see how they could, you know, run with that thread in the propaganda to, you know, make it look like there was going to be something really catastrophic occurring, which wasn't. But of course, you know, they averted a disaster that was never going to take place.
So, what you're telling me is you basically faked that you were going to blow the entire place up, and now they're putting that fake off as the truth.
That's correct. Yes. Yep.
So why exactly did you have to fake this thing? You couldn't just leave by the same way you got in?
Not exactly. No. No. The riot, the riot kind of took place like right in front of the facility as we were trying to figure out what was going on. There was a fairly peaceful protest occurring, but then a handful of individuals just escalated it. They started throwing, what was it, like Molotov cocktails or the equivalent, flash grenades or something,
Yeah,
smoke bombs.
Not us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Remember to remind him it's not us.
Very much improvised. And then just all hell broke loose. And in the smoke and confusion, we took advantage of that to get into the facility and secure a couple weapons on the way in.
Well, I don't know that there's much we can do to kind of stop this. Those guys are twisting everything that's done to their own ends. I don't like that this whole thing is being attributed to the hands of Valiant. I guess it's okay that it is, but I don't want to be in the same league with those animals, with those, you know, whoever they are, because they don't seem to care about civilian life or civilian lives. Because I don't know who started that riot at the protest, but I have a suspicion that it was probably them. And they got a lot of innocent people killed, you know, just innocent protesters killed because of that. And obviously the giant explosion on the on the Malibor 3, the giant kind of train depot explosion, if y'all remember. He goes, that was their work as far as anybody can tell. As far as any of our informants can tell, that was definitely their work. And we still can't figure out who they are. We have no idea who they are. They don't have any connection that we can find to anyone in the rebellion. We don't have any agents that are in their organization or anything like that. So the hands have completely blindsided us. I can tell you that much. I can't say whether or not they've blindsided the Imperial side, but they've definitely blindsided us.
Have you guys been looking into the possibility that the so-called Hands of Valiants are just Imperial agents, some little group that the Imperials have stood up, fighting in an entirely different uniform, if you will?
It wouldn't be the first time that they've done something like that, created their own kind of insurgents in order to use those insurgents to kind of firm their grip on a system. Wouldn't be the first time. And it's easy enough to kind of blame the rebellion for that too, especially if they want to do some major atrocities. They can blame it on us, and that tends to scare people away from the rebellion as well. So it wouldn't be the first time, and I would not be shocked if that's what's going on, but we don't have any way to know right now. And we do know they're not actively hunting them down as much as they're hunting down the rebels. I mean, I can tell you that much.
Okay, that's that's telling in and of itself. What do you think of the Queen's speech she gave the other day?
Well, it's pretty strong words. I don't really know where she stands in all this, to be honest with you. I mean, she seems like a noble ruler. All of her people seem to love her. She would probably be better to run this system than our councils do, because at least her system seems to be pretty much in peace all the time, as much as any system can ever be expected to. But I don't know what her aims are in all this. If maybe she's got a strange political motive as well. If maybe she's hoping to angle this the Empire versus the Malibor system into her taking control of the system. I don't know. Maybe that's there. Maybe she actually controls these hands, and that's part of her game as well. I mean, she's a ruler of a very large and very kind of profitable system. She's a politician just like any of the rest of them are, as far as I can see. So who knows how much power she ultimately wants.
Yes. I don't trust these royalty. What is this? I don't like it. I think that the Hands of Valiant's their behavior is very suspect. When they initially tried to assassinate the heads of the great houses at the great house meeting about slavery, when all this was starting, the Hands of Valiant almost they seem to have intentionally not attacked the Imperials, and the Imperial delegation present at that meeting seemed entirely unconcerned and unsurprised by the attack. So, to me, it seems that the possibility that the Hands of Valiant are working for the Imperials is very real.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, I wasn't there in the room, but that's what you've told me, is that they seem to be more interested in the kind of great house leadership than they were in the Empire. I do have to wonder what their plan was ultimately if they hadn't been stopped. If you guys hadn't been there to do anything, I'm kind of curious exactly what they were planning to do.
Also, keep in mind that the exposure of the slaving operation would have damaged the Imperials politically. So it's a very convenient time for the Hands of Valiant to try to assassinate everyone and change the topic.
Absolutely. If there was evidence there, it certainly seems to have dried up. Other than what you guys have found and what you've heard, we don't have any hard and fast evidence against the Imperials now. It seems like anybody who was connected to them has died, starting to disappear off of that. And so if they are behind a slaving ring, which we believe they are, of course, it's getting harder and harder to prove. And people are less and less interested in it at this point, the more the system is falling into chaos.
Yes. So
I know
yeah, go ahead.
we're pretty low on the food chain, but I'm going to jump back to the Queen for I think one last question. But I know we're pretty low on the food chain. But do you know if the rebellion's got any contacts at all with anybody in the Queen's organization?
I wouldn't. I work mainly here in the Malibor system, and I'm not even, without giving away too much information, I'm not even the ranking rebellion person here in this system. So just to let you know, but I don't know. If it exists, then it's way above my pay grade. But what is y'all's next plan of action? That's what I need to know. See if we can get you guys moving towards something else. Do you guys have any leads, or do I need to find something for you guys to do?
I think our plan was to look into the other slaving operations that we learned about when we got information from turning Harlow. So there are two main other fronts for slavery that we are interested in checking out, and we wanted to start disrupting them. We think that maybe by disrupting these slaving operations, we might be able to flush out prominent Imperials, such as Major Kretzner, and force them to expose themselves as being tied to the slaving operation.
Well, as long as your investigating doesn't include blowing up more of my station,
What?
that would be perfectly okay with me.
Blowing... No, never.
Yeah, that would be bad. We don't need any more of the station blowing up.
I think that's what we're planning to do as of now.
Okay, well, what do you need from me? What is there information or what?
So the establishment that we're interested in is the look at my notes. Fabrics place, Vincent's Fabrics. I don't remember where it's located. Where is it located? Is there the location for it?
It's closer to the center of the station. Kurt would actually be familiar with this place somewhat, because he has been pointed in that direction by coworkers. You know, they make nice things, or at least they make serviceable equipment, clothing and that sort of thing. So he would at least be vaguely familiar. I don't think he would have ever been there, but he would at least have heard of it.
So we'd like information about the surrounding area. I'd like to know if there are any, what the closest disreputable interplanetary shipping centers are, little hangars where these slaves might discreetly be taken. I would like to have surveillance footage of the area surrounding Vincent's Fabric, so we can analyze it. We think if they're operating as this establishment was when it was a slaving ring, then they are probably taking these slaves out late at night, perhaps, when there are not too many people. We want to know. We want to figure out how these people are being taken as slaves and processed and taken out of system, so that we can find a weak point in that chain where we can discreetly disrupt it.
Gotcha. All right. Well, I think we can get you that sort of information. He'll make a nod over to one of his little lackeys, as in like, yeah, see what you can get them, sort of thing. Jones, see what you can find out for these guys. I'm going back to XYZ. I'm going back to the station, but you guys, he should be able to get whatever you need. He just points to one of his random lackeys.
All right.
So yeah, we can they can dig that sort of thing up over the next couple of days, and give you kind of a quick rundown of the area, whether you guys want to visit or not. But they can give you a quick kind of rundown of that little neighborhood. What you know about, or at least what they can tell you about the neighborhood, is it's a fairly nice neighborhood. It's clean, it's safe, it's very often patrolled by the security personnel. It's got a good reputation as kind of a little small shopping district. There's a handful of stores that people are at least vaguely familiar with. They don't do tons of advertising, but a lot of these places don't, just because it is, as I've mentioned, you tend to stay in your neighborhoods. You venture outside of it sometimes, but typically everything you need is in one little area. Let's see, I wrote down a handful of stores here, but it's surrounded by what I wrote down as, quote, nice shops, not rundown, seedy little stalls on the street like some of the other ones you've been to. There is, and these names are going to be more funny than anything else. Krulika's Designs. It's a barber shop, in case you guys needed to show Slaishk what this is. It's run by a Wookiee, which I thought was funny.
Oh my gosh.
That's a
They go through a
Wookiee,
lot of vacuums.
yeah, Wookiee barbershop. It doesn't tend to Wookiees, but it has the person who runs it is one, which is she doesn't even need the chair to be pumped down in order to get on top of, to see over people. So you can you assume it's a she based on the name. I've got a Bottom Bolt. That's a hardware and tool shop, just generic stuff like that. I have the Short End. These are all funny names. The Electric Supply. They do stuff that Kurt might be interested in. Lots of computers, wiring, that sort of stuff. I actually have a place here because I'm not sure. I assume this stuff exists in the world. An equivalent to a bank. I'm guessing these sorts of places exist in the Star Wars universe. So this is there's the equivalent of a bank in this area, which is unusual, very unusual for the station, but they do exist. There is a gun shop, so this might be a place that Oscalit might want to go and do his little practicing to become familiar with the area. Let's see, there's at least one bar. It looks like a couple of bars and taverns. A Greasy Spoon style restaurant. That, like I said, it's a fairly nice neighborhood. It's got a fair amount of stuff. And all the shops look to have housing above them, more than likely owned by the person who runs the shop. It's a very nice neighborhood that you guys are wandering into. So hopefully it doesn't get blown up. I'd be very disappointed.
Okay. Do we see anything interesting in the surveillance footage?
If you watch, about what times are you looking for? I guess is kind of you're looking at night, and what kind of time period, if that makes sense, like over the past week, over the past month, over the past 6 months.
Yeah, if we have access, I'd like to look at before the Great Houses attack.
Okay.
And look at night. I'm also gonna be. I'm also looking for any time when they. If I don't see anything at night, I also want to look for any time where they're actually taking stuff out. So I don't know that this place would be in the business of making shipments out. I could see them receiving large shipments, but large boxes coming out, I would be interested in. But I'd start looking at night.
All right. Well, you'll notice that obviously the district is a lot more crowded and a lot more busy than any of the other ones you've seen. It's not a lot of shadowy people moving around. It's a very open and nice neighborhood. So always people visiting. Seems to, there's the occasional scuffle. It is Star Wars, so there's always going to be the occasional scuffle. Security has to be brought in, that sort of thing. But in general, it's a pretty nice neighborhood. And even at night, it's still somewhat crowded. Unlike the other places where you've been, where night, quote unquote, the night cycle tends to see people shutting their doors and hiding inside.
Hmm.
This one, it's not so much. There actually is a bit of a healthy nightlife for people visiting the local
Okay.
restaurants and taverns and that sort of thing. You don't really notice anything specific about the place. You see workers and average people going in and, say spend half an hour, 45 minutes, and then they leave. Occasionally they go in and then they, are only there for a couple minutes and leave. But you don't notice any large, like somebody goes in and then doesn't come out, right? You kind of keep a visual eye on this, and you're like, nobody's going in and then not coming back out. They all said it just looks like a regular store so far as you guys can tell. So it's even at night, like you don't see any large kind of shipments leaving the place. You don't even really see a lot of large shipments entering the place. You do see them, but they're not like these massive, giant boxes of stuff. And it's kind of difficult to fully gather what's what exactly they do, because you never really see anybody leave with anything either. Like people don't carry out large packages when they leave the store either. Like, if that makes sense. Like people are going in and leaving with the same stuff they came in with. So it's a little bit that would probably be the only thing that would strike you guys as a little weird. Like if you see people go into the hardware store, for example, they all like sometimes they don't come out with anything, but most of the time somebody comes out with something in their arms, a package or what looks like a new tool or that sort of thing. But that's the only thing you do kind of notice after a while, is that people go in there and don't really leave with anything. It's a little odd.
Okay. Let's see. So we're not seeing an obvious pattern that would indicate that these guys are enslaving people at this facility, at this shop. We know
Right.
they're tied to slavery in some way. It might be worth our while to offer them a little bait and see what happens. What do you guys feel like?
Yeah, I
I
guess
do
it's
enjoy a good
possible.
trap.
Oh, okay. Yeah, good trap.
I do enjoy a good trap. Yeah, I do enjoy a good trap.
Yeah, I guess these guys
were you
could
looking
be.
at any time? Sorry, were you looking at any time recent, or were you just looking at before the Great House meeting?
I would mainly want to look at before Great House meeting, but I think I would also want to take a look at Great House meeting just to see how things had changed.
Okay. Well, you notice after the Great House meeting, there's no activity. Like there's nobody going in and out or anything.
Sounds like we might be late, like
Okay,
before.
so I'll skip around, just taking quick peeks. Is there any activity at all at any point after the Great House meeting?
Not really. You occasionally see somebody come up to the door and then leave, but at least from your security footage, you're not seeing anything.
So it looks closed.
Yeah, you would guess that it's probably closed.
Or completely annihilated by Hinene or some such.
Yeah, I guess it could be gutted on the inside for all you know.
Yeah, I mean, basically that's how we came into Bed and Booze over here, right? We were just a little bit too late, and right after the great meeting, they completely destroyed everyone.
Yeah.
Well, that doesn't sound too promising.
There might be evidence there that we could gather.
Well, if we do consider gathering it, maybe we could have Kurt work on a digital lead while you and I go and scavenge for evidence.
It's not a bad idea. Kurt, do you have any leads that you wanted to follow up in the meantime?
Yeah. There's two. I would like to put some energy into trying to identify the kidnapped person that had been previously mentioned as something that was going to take a fair amount of effort. So I'd like to put some energy into that. And then I'd also like to see if I can't figure out who the old blind man in the electricians guild is,
Okay.
because of what we had kind of overheard. I think it was through Kayla, our bar owner.
Yeah. Yep.
So I think those are the two that I'd like to try to put some energy into through, doing a little bit of slicing and investigation. And then if there's some downtime and I've got the ability to talk to people, especially like for the old blind man, try and run that while my algorithms are scouring. Yes.
All right.
Okay. Alrighty. I will let you do that. Who wants to go first?
Why don't Slaishk and I do our thing first? So
Okay.
Yeah,
just
that
gonna-
sounds good.
we're just gonna head down, and I think that at first maybe we should just walk around, get a little bit of the land on our feet, not conspicuously peeking into Vincent's fabrics, but just looking around and seeing if we see anything.
Okay. Well, you going during the day, during the night? What time?
Yeah, I think during the day. I think
Okay.
during the day is fine.
Well, Slaishk will draw a teensy bit of attention. He's pretty much the only Trandoshan that's kind of wandering around. But not so much that like people are pointing and saying anything. More just like, you don't really see those around very often in this area, in this neck of the woods. But otherwise, I mean, it's a fairly nice mix of races and that sort of thing out there. But I think Trandoshans aren't everywhere on the station either. So, but they're kind of like Wookiees. You really haven't seen a Wookiees wandering around on here either. So,
Right. Yeah.
And in fact, I think that what did I say here? Krulika is probably the first one y'all would have come in contact with, and you just see her through the barbershop window. As you wander around town, there is like I said, I basically just stole our downtown area here in Mooresville for it, and just renamed shops. So there's a candy store. If you guys like candy, do you even know what candy is in the Star Wars universe? So there's like a candy and delicacies bakery sort of place. Obviously the barbershop, the bar and tavern, all the kind of standard stuff I mentioned. You'll notice it's all open. You can see into most of the places, nice big windows. And you can see in, for example, in the barbershop, and it looks like a jovial place. So think like the old school barbershops, like you might imagine, where everybody's laughing and having a good time. And there's a couple barbers in there doing their thing. Almost looks like a hangout, if that makes sense, where locals tend to hang out for a few hours.
Mm-hmm.
So like I said, it's all friendly place. The whole place seems really nice. The only kind of exception to this is the Vincent's Fabrics place, which is dark, and it has a sign on the, I guess, I'm trying to think, paper doesn't really exist in this world. I actually looked that up. It's like paper is exceedingly rare in the Star Wars universe. So
yeah,
it would have some form of something scrawled on it that the shop isn't closed, just that the owner is out of town. But it doesn't have like a back, so it's like a temporarily closed, but it doesn't have like a will be back in 2 days sort of thing, just a temporarily closed sign. But if you peer through the windows, you can see that there's still stuff inside. It's not emptied. It's not like a vacant storefront. It still looks like a shop because it's not pitch black. They've got some kind of security lighting or that sort of thing going on inside of it. But if you ask around, just in general, you'll find out that shortly after, within a day or two of the Great House meeting, that he closed up shop and no one has seen him since. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe to help us continue improving and expanding our channel's content.